Good morning, guys. It is Thursday, April 11th, 2024. This Bathrow Business. I'm Georgi Oganov. I got the coffee and I got the news. All the news this morning is going to be about inflation. That's really all I'm talking about because it's still the biggest subject in the news. So, this morning, we got PPI data coming out. This is the producer price index. So, this is the manufacturing, I shouldn't say manufacturing, but this is the cost of goods before they reach consumer levels. So this is also another number. It's less crucial than the others, than the PCE and the CPI, but it's still something to take note. So it rose 0.2%, which is below expectations, but it's actually still high, the highest number we've seen since April of 2023. So it is actually, again, moving in a negative direction from the perspective of us as consumers, but in a positive direction, numerically speaking. So inflation for PPI is up as well. So this is just another inflation number that is showing that inflation is once again not just only on the rise within a particular sector, but across the economy as a whole. The other one I want to report on is SuperCore Inflation, which is not a number I was familiar with until reading up on it this morning. So SuperCore Inflation is just really a more refined, stripped down version of the CPI data that really just looks at more of cost of services rather than cost of goods. The theory is that the cost of goods can fluctuate a little bit based on production, based on supply chains, whereas cost of services are sticky. The cost of a haircut, the cost of a plumber, they're going to stay very consistent. And so SuperCore inflation is actually 4.8% year over year. That's really bad. That's horrendous. And it looks like from everything I read that the Fed is actually paying more attention to this than they have in previous years because it's not a small number to look at. The other thing I want to report on is just a little bit of a refinement from yesterday's numbers. So, give me 1 second. So, in yesterday's numbers, where the inflation is hitting the hardest, surprisingly, it's not in groceries like I expected, just simply because that was my own anecdotal evidence. Groceries are obviously up, but they're only up about 1.2%. Whereas some of the biggest costs are auto insurance, auto costs, rent, and housing. Now that's interesting simply because I actually talked about auto insurance being a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator, a few months ago when people were saying, oh, insurances are going up, but this is a lagging indicator. This is a response to previous inflation. I was the one that was saying, no, that's not how insurance works. Insurance is a leading indicator because insurance is literally based off of future cost. The entire insurance model is based off of predicting the costs of tomorrow, not predicting the cost of the past. If insurance predicted the cost of the past, they would be bankrupt because they wouldn't have enough money for payouts if they were working off of old data. They specifically target future forecasts because they have actuaries that go out and estimate what future costs are going to be. They look at supply chains, they look at manufacturing costs. They have some of the best inflation data in the world. And the fact that insurance costs were going up across the board, not just auto, but specifically in auto, in this scenario, was a sign that inflation was going to be on the rise. This wasn't a lagging indicator, this was a leading indicator, and here it is again in the data. So look at your insurance rates because they're going to tell you which direction the economy is headed. And auto insurance was up 22.2% year over year. That's huge. That's a quarter percent, not quarter percent. That's 22%. That's, for every dollar, that's an additional 25 cents. That's a massive increase. Rent is up as well, which really surprised me because all I heard about was rent was falling, but rent is actually up 5.7 year over year, and housing is up 4.7, despite the fact that housing prices are falling. I was actually decepted by that data as well. Like I said, groceries are actually only slightly up 1.2%, so that's actually also good because right now a lot of talk is being made about cost of gas and avian flu in regards to groceries, that they could be pushing inflation higher. But here it's one of the smallest increases we've seen so far. It's really the services industries, housing, auto insurance, things like that are really pushing these inflation rates higher. And that's very bad because that's something that's not easily solved. So that's that with inflation. I guess that's actually the last story I have with inflation. Like I said, today is kind of a slower day because everyone is just talking about inflation rates and what's going to happen. Clearly, this means rate cuts are not coming anytime soon. And another thing about rate cuts I want to kind of drill into you guys' heads. We talk about this a lot, that even if inflation wasn't around, the economy is running hot. So even in a normal cycle, the Fed shouldn't be cutting rates in this environment, because if the economy is running hot, you would be raising interest rates, period. But the other thing I want to talk about is we've kind of been spoiled to think that low interest rates are the standard. 5.5% base interest rate is actually really good. It's actually the standard. We lived in an unusual decade where inflation rates were artificially low, but that's not the standard. We're actually just returning to the standard. And given everything we're seeing with inflation, given demographic data, given the instability with the world and supply chain, we just have to accept that this is the standard level. This is a good interest rate. Honestly, this is the interest rate that my dad bought his house at. So I don't see what the problem here is. We have to just get accustomed to the fact that these inflation rates are good, and it is good because, as I talked about on this channel, high interest rates help individual consumers. The low interest rates do not help individual consumers. They help major corporations. So the higher these interest rates go, the better off you are. That's pretty much it as far as all the news stories I have. I'm just going to mention one little one as a minor one as I sign off. Imports from China are actually rising at their fastest rate since fall, and outpacing where they were at this point last year. This is just interesting because despite all the talk of decoupling, despite the fact that China had slow GDP growth last year, it seems to be actually rebounding. And just a couple months ago, I announced that Mexico was outpacing imports over China. We were getting more imports from Mexico than China. That number may actually be reversed at the end of the year. So we'll see what happens. Despite all this talk about reshoring and cutting ties with China, imports are actually moving back up, and significantly. That's pretty much it. I got to get to work, so I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. I hope you have a productive day.